and I welcome you to this international webinar on consciousness studies and research, ancient and modern, hosted by Vivekananda Center for Consciousness Studies and Research under School of Indian Heritage, Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda Educational and Research Institute, in collaboration with Center for Consciousness Studies, Nimhans, Bangalore. Uh, we are happy that you are with us today. Swamiji, after his graduation in mechanical engineering, he joined the Ramakrishna Order in the year 1987. He was the head of the Rajkot Center for nearly 7 years. Swamiji represented Ramakrishna Mission in UNESCO conferences on youth and their social impact held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and Tunisia. He is one of the three official monastic representatives of Ramakrishna Mission to the UNESCO events. Presently, he is the minister in charge, Ramakrishna Vedanta Center, Bone End, UK. Swamiji is going to enlighten us on the topic consciousness, yoga perspective with special reference to Swami Vivekananda's Raja Yoga. Swamiji.
Namaste to all of you from London. It's early morning here, and it's very significant and it's a great privilege to speak on this very important topic, which is engaging the minds of a lot of scholars, academicians, and we are celebrating the 125th anniversary of Swami Vivekananda's visit to England. That's another coincidence. Not very far from here, about 7 miles from here, Swami Vivekananda stayed for 3 days in the house of Miss Henrietta Muller, who financed the purchase of Belur Math's land when Swamiji was struggling for funds. And it is just 7 miles away from the place, from our center here. It's known as Mead House. And there Swami Vivekananda made a very significant statement. He said, civilization has to be turned upside down. He was taking tea in the afternoon. And he said, civilization, the thought currents of the civilization has to be turned upside down. Perhaps he was the prophet that he was. He had begun his mission before he came to England in 1895. And it was in 1896, in July, the same month, when the Raj Yoga was first published, which is one of his lasting contribution to world thought. And perhaps that was the beginning of his ministration and his effort to change the thought currents, not only in the field of spirituality, but also in other fields. Consciousness, of course, the topic which has been given to me is consciousness, yoga perspective with special reference to Vivekananda's Raj Yoga. Now, consciousness studies are gaining a lot of popularity. There are cognitive scientists, psychoanalysts, neurobiologists, quantum physicists, and apart from that, philosophers, of course, and many others who are engaged in this research. But most of the efforts which have been made till now, even though Swamiji nearly 125 years ago, through his Raj Yoga, spoke about consciousness, and also on his different lectures on Jnana Yoga, which he delivered in London. Many of them were delivered in London nearly 125 years ago. So in Jnana Yoga, he also he speaks about the idea of consciousness, which was not very well known in those days. There were vague ideas. And even now, I think, in spite of all the contemporary assumptions and approaches to the study of consciousness, most of the attempts are materialistic or reductionist in nature. And most of the people who try to understand this problem of consciousness are faced with the problem to solve how objective phenomena, which is the field of science, a study of the objective phenomena, can produce subjective experiences. The dominant view in neuroscience now, I'll not dwell upon that, cognitive science or the philosophy of mind and all its related disciplines, is that consciousness is a product of the neural network in the brain. But how and where everything is put together to form a coherent whole is still a big mystery for almost all the fields of all the scientists in all the different fields. So without spending much time in highlighting the deficiencies in the modern contemporary discourse on consciousness, we'll try to understand it in the light of Swamiji's thoughts on the subject, especially his Raj Yoga. I would not confine myself to Raj Yoga because Swami Vivekananda's thoughts on consciousness, which we find scattered, the complete works of Swami Vivekananda, are based on the firm foundation of the Upanishads. Of course, Upanishads form the basis of yoga as well, in a certain sense. His response was to the materialistic challenges of his time. We have to remember that science was different in those days, nearly 125 years ago. And his response to the materialistic challenges of his time, which he had to face both in America and then in England, by physiologists, psychologists, and the so-called naturalistic philosophers, to whom he presented his unique synthesis of Sankhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. They will help us immensely to explore and offer alternative perspectives to consciousness studies in modern times. Now, just to have a brief discussion on what are the contemporary approaches to consciousness. First of all, I'll tell you, whenever necessary, I will just present a few slides which may be necessary. I have 8 of them, but I'll try to show them whenever it is necessary. So before I show the slide, let us just briefly summarize what are the contemporary approaches to consciousness. Contemporary approaches to consciousness, especially in neuroscience and philosophy of mind, are trying to prove, as I said, that mind and consciousness are properties of the brain. Now, with the modern state-of-the-art brain imaging technology, a lot of research has been done. And the current consensus based on all these studies are that consciousness is a product of the neural activity of the brain. But how this neural activity in different parts of the brain corresponding with different functions are coordinated and integrated to generate a comprehensive cognition and produce awareness, a kind of awareness, which is fundamental to the study of Upanishads. The study of awareness, the study of pure consciousness is fundamental to the study of Upanishads. That's the fundamental issue, Prajnanam Brahma. Philosophers of the mind, though they agree that consciousness is related to awareness, but there is very little consensus with respect to its definition, and there are different approaches. Now we find that there were basically 2 approaches. One is Cartesian dualism. I'll just share my screen, and there is a small slide which will give you in a nutshell what are the different approaches just through one slide. So shall I share the screen?
Yes, Maharaj, please. Please.
Am I able to? Just give me 1 second. Yeah. Can you see the screen now? Hello.
Yes,
Can you
Maharaj.
all?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we can.
Now I'm just in one slide. I'm trying to summarize what are the different whole range of approaches, contemporary approaches to consciousness. Basically, it started with Cartesian dualism, which in brief says that minds are real things which are fundamental, and they are different from material things. So there was this kind of dualism which was proposed by Descartes, and the mental properties are the states of this immaterial entity. So there were two entities, hence human beings are nothing but a combination of material bodies and immaterial minds. Now on the other end is eliminative materialism, which is the extreme kind of materialism which holds that the minds simply do not exist, and mental properties and mental states do not occur independently. They are all dependent on the biological or the neural network and the physiological processes involved with. So according to eliminative materialism, the world is composed of material things having physical properties. Now all the other philosophies, all the different approaches like reductionism, behaviorism of Skinner, functionalism, biological naturalism, there were a host of attempts made to explain this idea of consciousness. Hence, most of the contemporary definitions and approaches to the study of this consciousness are overwhelmingly materialistic. Now, matter is considered to create consciousness. It's a product of the neural activity of the brain. So it somehow resembles the digital network in computers. Now with artificial intelligence and other things becoming so prominent, we'll find that they are trying very hard to show that digital network in the computers, of course, the consciousness can be reduced to an idea which is the neural network of the brain will produce this consciousness, just as a computer produces the different the artificial intelligence helps the computer to produce a kind of intelligent behavior. Now coming to the consciousness according to Sankhya Yoga, and Vedanta. That is the second aspect we'll just discuss before we discuss Swamiji's thoughts on Raj Yoga. So I'll just have a slide, but before that, according to Vedanta, all of us know that Brahman is the ultimate reality underlying everything. Sat, Chit and Ananda, that's the best possible definition which is used to somewhat describe Brahman, which according to Swamiji are not attributes or qualities, but the very essence of Brahman. Satchidananda is the very essence of Brahman. Chit or consciousness is the very essence of Brahman. The Upanishads not only ascribe consciousness to be Brahman, but equate Brahman directly with consciousness. That is Prajnanam Brahma. Consciousness is Brahman. These ideas also are found in Sankhya Yoga, which form the basis of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras or the Raj Yoga of Swamiji. It posits two entities, Purusha and Prakriti. Just like the Brahman of Vedanta, these ideas are found, pure consciousness is the essence of Purusha. While Prakriti, which is composed of the three gunas and all its transformation, can be compared to matter and energy in scientific terminology. All matter and energy put together forms the Prakriti. So in the transcendent plane, the Atman or Purusha remains in its own nature as pure awareness. There is a Yoga Sutra, Tada Drashtuhu, Swarupe Avasthanam. In this pure state, the Purusha remains in its own nature as pure awareness. That is fundamental to the understanding of the concept of consciousness according to yoga or according to Swami Vivekananda's Raj Yoga. Tada Drashtuhu, Swarupe Avasthanam. And then we have Vritti Sarupya Itaratra. phenomenal consciousness, as we see, the consciousness which the Westerners and the scientists are attempting to study, through which external objects are known. We are conscious of the external world and our own minds. They occur due to the reflection of pure consciousness upon the buddhi. So that's why these vrittis are formed. Vritti sarupya itaratra. When the Purusha does not remain in its own nature as pure awareness, during other periods of time, these vrittis give rise to a reflected consciousness or phenomenal consciousness, as it is known. And that's the subject of study for a majority of the people who are studying consciousness. So in the Upanishads, to sum up, consciousness is described as a self-luminous entity animating all subtle and gross matter also. Consciousness then is twofold. One is pure consciousness and the other is phenomenal consciousness. Pure consciousness is the essence of Brahman or Purusha in yoga, while phenomenal consciousness is a byproduct of the pure consciousness's reflection in the buddhi or intellect. So three aspects are there. Self-illumination of this consciousness, we can say three aspects. There are three aspects. Self-illumination. Second thing is it is a witness to all the activities, witness to the entire Prakriti's, the drama unfolded by Prakriti, and it's the substratum without which no unified experience is possible. They are the important dimensions of pure consciousness, which facilitates cognition, conation, that is willing, and affection or emotion. So whatever states of the mind we see, they are facilitated by this pure consciousness, which is the background, which has three distinct qualities: self-illumination, it is the witness to all the different states, sleep, deep sleep, waking, and dream. All these states are also this state of Turiya, which is pure consciousness, is a witness to all these different states. And cognition, conation, and affection are facilitated by this pure consciousness as the substratum. So that is the whole idea of Sankhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. Now let us come to Swami Vivekananda's. I'll just show one small slide which explains this. Yeah. So consciousness, according to Sankhya, Yoga, Vedanta, says self-illumination is one of the criterions of Atman or pure consciousness. The Kathopanishad refers to the Atman as one truly conscious entity among the conscious objects. This is the supporting statement from the Katha. Mundaka also 229 declares that in Brahman, the stainless and indivisible Brahman shines in the highest golden sheath. It is pure. It is the light of lights. It is that which they know who know the self. Now, the second criteria or the second aspect of consciousness is it is an ultimate witness as separate from the body-mind complex. So this idea is found in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. It says that you cannot see that which is the witness of vision. You cannot hear that which is the hearer of hearing. You cannot think that which is the thinker of thought. So behind all these processes is the witness. You cannot know that which is the knower of knowledge. This is yourself that is within all. Everything else but this is perishable. So this is another characteristic of consciousness or aspect of consciousness according to Vedanta, which says the self as the ultimate self is the ultimate witness. Even yoga accepts that Purusha is the ultimate witness. Then finally, there's one more aspect which we should consider, the self as the substratum. Mandukya Upanishad says that the Turiya or the pure consciousness is not only the fourth or transcendental state, but it is the unrelated witness or substratum of all the experiences like the states of dream, waking, and deep sleep. Turiya as the substratum is comparable, Swamiji gives an example, to a stationary and unrelated screen on which disjoined but successive pictures are projected, and you see the movie on a screen. It gives connection and continuity to these disjoint and successive states and experiences. This is a wonderful illustration which Swamiji gives. As the screen does for a projector. When the projector projects the film, all the different images, successive images, find a substratum on which these unified experience is possible. So also, both Mandukya and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad refers to these three states: waking, dream, and deep sleep, Jagrut, Swapna, and Sushupti, and say Turiya is the fourth and transcendental state which pervades all the three states. This is another important aspect. Now we come to Swami Vivekananda's basic ideas. What is consciousness according to Swamiji? First, let us just summarize what he said in his Jnana Yoga lectures. There is a famous lecture, there's a wonderful lecture which Swamiji delivered, and perhaps he delivered it in London. Most of his Jnana Yoga, many of his Jnana Yoga lectures were delivered in London. So here Swamiji distinguishes between, there's a famous lecture, the real and apparent man. He distinguishes between apparent man and the real man. The apparent man refers to the body-mind complex, while the real man refers to the self or Atman, this pure consciousness. The body-mind complex not only includes the gross physical body, the organs like the brain and other organs, fine as well as gross, but also the fine body, which is composed of manas, mind, buddhi, and ahankara, ego. Common to both physical and this annamaya sharira or pranamaya sharira, and all the different koshas are there, different shariras are there. Common to both this physical and the fine body, sukshma and sthula sharira, is that there are a combination, that these are just a combination of molecules, which Swamiji reduces beautifully to Akasha and Prana. He tries to synthesize science and Vedanta. Akasha and Prana. Akasha is the most basic form of matter according to Swamiji. And Prana is the most basic form of energy, of which all the other energies are manifestations. So pure consciousness, but all these things, both Akasha and Prana, are still matter. Though Akasha is finer matter and Prana also is a finer kind of energy, but they are all gross. Pure consciousness is intrinsic to the Atman, whereas that is the real man, whereas the apparent man or the apparent universe, the phenomenal universe as we say, the cosmic universe, is devoid of consciousness as its essence. This is reflected consciousness we can see, but its essence is in the pure consciousness or Atman or Brahman. Rather, the body-mind complex is completely reliant and animated by this pure consciousness. Now, we will come to the aspects of consciousness according to Swamiji. As I said, there are three important aspects of Swamiji. I have just tried to classify it as he expresses it through Raj Yoga and also through his other lectures on Vedanta or Jnana Yoga. So according to Swamiji, three important aspects of pure consciousness are: first is self-luminosity, second it is a substratum, third it is an eternal witness which facilitates cognition, conation and affection. Now Swamiji rules out the possibility. He slowly has to establish it because it was very difficult in those days to establish the possibility of the idea of a pure consciousness independent of the material universe. This was not something which materialists would have easily accepted in those days. So he rules out the possibility of pure consciousness being intrinsic to the body-mind complex for two reasons. He gives two reasons. Why you can't say that consciousness is a product of the body-mind complex or the material universe as we see, which scientists are trying to prove. They want to reduce everything to material and matter and energy. First, the body-mind complex, being a product of Akasha and Prana, according to Vedanta, is gross. That which is gross cannot have self-luminosity. That is one of the fundamental tenets of Vedanta or Yoga. That which is gross can never have self-luminosity as its very essence. Second very important factor is that brain and body-mind complex is subject to incessant change as the universe is involved and evolved cyclically. This whole universe is subject to constant change. This is an observed phenomena. There's nothing mysterious about it. And scientists are accepting that, the cyclical nature of change. But that which is self-luminous cannot change. It cannot grow or it cannot decay. In comparison to the borrowed light, the borrowed light may become bright or dim as the manifestation changes. That is why when the body is strong and when the mind is vigorous, there seems to be a greater manifestation of consciousness than when we are weak. When we are weak, we say the person is not conscious. When he goes to coma, he says he's not conscious. Hence, the consciousness of the body and mind is just apparent. It's just a reflection on the Atman. Swamiji compares it beautifully to the mind which is waxing and waning, which he compares it to the waxing and waning of the moon, which is completely reliant on the sun for its light. The light of the sun is shining on the moon, it waxes and wanes. So it is borrowed light which the moon gets. So that is another example Swamiji gives. Another further dimension of pure consciousness is that it is an unbroken substratum, this pure consciousness, the last one. The crux of Swamiji's argument is that substratum is that change that can be conceived against the backdrop of something less changing. Ultimately, if you extend this logic, this substratum must be completely stationary. It cannot be changing. If everything changes, then there is no substratum with which you can measure this change. Given that the matter and energy that we see, the prakriti that we see, is subject to change, the ultimate backdrop or the substratum must be non-matter. It cannot be matter or energy, because matter and energy changes. So there should be something which does not change. And as I told you, Swamiji compares it to the stationary screen, which coordinates the rays of light thrown upon it by a projector, which would otherwise be dissipated. We cannot see the image at all. So while pure consciousness is the very essence and basis of all our cognition, the world as we see, it is neither known or unknown like empirical knowledge, which we see, but it is beyond. It is its very presence that gives rise, it's the presence of this pure consciousness gives rise to all that is known by us, all the fragments of knowledge which we gather through our experiences. They are possible only because of the presence of this pure consciousness, which we will, which we intend, and it remains as a separate witness. It is not affected or bothered by it. Now I'll share the two slides which will summarize this whole idea, giving references from Swamiji's Raj Yoga. So I would like to share a few quotations. We'll just go through these wonderful quotations of Swamiji from Jnana Yoga and from Raj Yoga to give you an idea what this self-luminosity according to. So in Swamiji's own words, we'll just go through it. This first slide shows that. Now the self-luminous aspect of consciousness is, how can we know, Swamiji says, that there is something behind this mind? Because knowledge or consciousness, in those days, the word consciousness was not used so much. Swamiji, instead of consciousness, he sometimes uses the word knowledge. Sat, Chit, existence, knowledge, and bliss. So existence, now we say being, consciousness, and bliss. But in those days, knowledge was also used. So Swamiji says, consciousness, which is self-illuminating and the basis of intelligence, cannot belong to dull, dead matter. Never was seen any gross matter which had intelligence as its own essence. No dull or dead matter can illumine itself. It is intelligence which illumines all matter. The body is not self-luminous. If it were so, it would be so in a dead man also. Neither can the mind nor spiritual, consisting of mind, intellect, and egoism body, be self-luminous. They are not of the essence of intelligence. That which is self-luminous cannot decay. The luminosity of that which shines through borrowed light comes and goes, but that which is light itself, what can make that come and go, flourish and decay? So this is the self-luminosity aspect of consciousness. The second aspect, there's a wonderful quote of Swamiji. This is again from his Jnana Yoga. The self as the ultimate witness. How Swamiji proves it. He says, God is more than known. This chair is known. He pointed out to a chair and said, but God is intensely more than that, because in and through him we have to know this chair itself. He is the witness, the eternal witness of all knowledge. Whatever we know, we have to know in and through him. He is the essence of our own self. He is the essence of this ego. This I and we cannot know anything excepting in and through that. Therefore, you have to know everything in and through that Brahman. So, self as the ultimate witness, this is a nice quote. And finally, we come to the quote which Swamiji, as I explained earlier, Swamiji gives this. This is also from Jnana Yoga. Swamiji says, where is this unity in the human organs, falling upon which, as it were, the various ideas will come to unity and become one complete whole? This certainly cannot be the mind itself, because mind itself changes, seeing that it also changes. Therefore, there must be something which is neither the body nor the mind, something which changes not, something permanent upon which all our ideas, all our sensations fall to form a unity and a complete whole. And this is the real soul, the Atman of man. See how he comes to the conclusion. And seeing that everything material, whether you call it fine matter or mind, must be changeful, seeing that what you call gross matter, what you call gross matter or the external world must also be changeful in comparison to that. This unchangeable something cannot be of a material substance. Therefore, it has to be spiritual, indestructible, unchangeable. This something upon which the mind is painting all these pictures, this something upon which all our sensations carried by the mind and intellect are placed and grouped together to form a unity, is what is called the soul of man. So this is such a wonderful idea. In those days, you can imagine, he was speaking to people who were rational, who wanted a rational experience. See the rationality of this wonderful passage, where he shows that there should be a substratum, this consciousness or this Atman or Brahman, which is the substratum of all our experiences. Without that, it is irrational to accept, to get a coherent experience, a unity. And this idea of soul of man has been established by Swamiji so beautifully. So now we come to the other states of consciousness according to Swamiji. Now we'll use his ideas on Raj Yoga. We will come, these were basically the ideas which Swamiji gave in his Jnana Yoga. Now we'll come to the Raj Yoga aspect, where you will find he uses Raj Yoga. As you all know, the name Raj Yoga was coined by Swamiji. It also forms a part of Hatha Yoga. Traditionally, this word Raj Yoga means a part of Hatha Yoga. But Swamiji used Raj Yoga in the sense of he compared it, or maybe he based it on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which is one of the main texts of yoga. But at the same time, he has synthesized several ideas from the Tantras and Vedanta. And his Raj Yoga, you may say, is a unique book, one of the books which he dictated. And it was not a series of lectures, which were, some of them were lectures, part of the lectures which he delivered in New York. But most of it was dictated by him. And he wanted to leave behind in the West something concrete on yoga philosophy. And Raj Yoga was a product of that desire of Swamiji, which he wrote. And in this Raj Yoga, you will find, especially his discussion in the initial chapters on prana, the cosmic prana, the psychic prana, many things which were not very clear, and especially do not form part of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras as such. A cursory study of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras will not make these ideas clear. But Swamiji wrote an elaborate introduction and also discussed the concept of prana and Kundalini. Kundalini is a unique thing which Swamiji has adapted and integrated with this wonderful teachings on Raj Yoga. So we have the ideas from Upanishads, Vedanta, We have ideas from Tantras and also yoga. Of course, Raj Yoga is based on Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, on which he wrote a commentary as well. So let us see what are the states of consciousness according to Swamiji. In the Upanishads, of course, in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is a reference to three states: Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti. Swamiji's approach is more in line with Patanjali's Yoga Sutras and Western psychology while dealing with different states of consciousness. In the famous chapter, in the beautiful chapter, Psychic Prana, the Psychic Prana chapter of his book on Raj Yoga, Swamiji refers to three planes. He has beautifully integrated it. He calls it three planes of existence. Mahakasha, which is Akasha, of course, can be imagined in three different levels. Mahakasha, which is known as the elemental space, normally the space which science understands, the elemental space. Then Akasha has another wonderful dimension to it, and that is Chitta Akasha, the mental space. These are the three categories Swamiji has very clearly delineated in his Raj Yoga. And he says in the Psychic Prana, the chapter on Psychic Prana in his Raj Yoga, and he says Chitta Akasha is the mental space. That is also a kind of space, Akasha. And finally, we come to the Chidakasha or knowledge space, the Chit Akasha. Chit means consciousness space, the mental space or the elemental space. These planes are distinguished they are distinguished between each other based on differences. This is a unique idea of Swamiji. The difference is only because of the vibration of the prana. Prana vibrates in different ways. This idea of prana itself is something unique, which he has elaborated to in such a great, such a wonderful way, in a unique way. He says this prana, depending on the vibration of this prana, the different akashas can be distinguished with each other. Mahakasha is the elemental space. We go to a higher plane. It is Chitta Akasha. Chitta means the mind, the mental space, and Chidakasha or the knowledge space. Now, the vast mass of prana, according to Swamiji, he has combined this idea of Tantra as Kundalini also, which literally speaking does not form part of yoga. But that is the genius of Swamiji, that he brings in the Kundalini Shakti. And he says this vast mass of prana in the universe or even in the individual body, the microcosm and the macrocosm, that remains dormant in the Muladhara. The Muladhara, the 7 different chakras which are there in Kundalini. Will not go into the discussion of that. But the vast mass of prana remains dormant in the Muladhara as Kundalini Shakti. That has to be awakened. And when it awakens progressively, these different spaces, you experience these different spaces. The Mahakasha, you begin with Mahakasha, then Chittakasha, mental space, and then the knowledge or the pure consciousness. When you reach Samadhi, the 7th plane, you reach a state where you see everything as pure consciousness. You perceive or experience everything as pure consciousness. One can transcend this elemental space. So in essence, Swamiji says, what Swamiji says in his Raj Yoga, that one can transcend this elemental space or the Mahakasha and rise to mental space by tapping into and channelizing the storehouse of this energy, Kundalini Shakti, to higher and higher centers through the regulation of pranayama. So the whole idea of pranayama is based on this rising of the psychic energy from the elemental space to the mental space to the Chidakasha, which is knowledge space, and which results in pure consciousness. So in one stroke, he is trying to explain the idea of consciousness and the raising of consciousness through yoga, tantras, and Vedanta. Now, Swamiji's ideas about unconscious, there are 4 things which he speaks of. Consciousness also, according to Raj Yoga, in Raj Yoga and in many other places, he talks about unconscious, conscious, superconscious, and one more word he uses is ultra conscious. We will come to those things now. Swamiji's most common reference, he says, he was very much upset when he saw everybody is making so much fuss in the West about consciousness in the sense the consciousness as we understand, the unconscious, conscious, and the superconscious. He says most of our life we live very little on the conscious plane. There is a huge amount of unconscious which we have not tapped, which is unknown to us. Only yogis try to know that unconscious. And there is another vast layer of superconsciousness, which is again not accessible. This consciousness is a very thin film between the unconscious and the superconscious. And he says, and that's why the object of Raj Yoga, to understand what consciousness means in Raj Yoga, we have to tap into this unconscious. And this he is using, he has discussed in many of his talks other than Raj Yoga. He discusses these themes, different states of consciousness in Raj Yoga, 6 lessons on Raj Yoga. That is another book which he, another small booklet, hints on practical spirituality which he delivered, the claims of religion. In Raj Yoga, he says, the unconscious, conscious, and superconscious states belong to one and the same mind. Not that they belong to different people. We have the same states, but we can go from one state to the other. They are not 3 minds in one man, but one state of it develops into the other. Hence, these states are different points on the same continuum of consciousness. The conscious plane seems to correspond, the conscious plane, as we see the world, we experience the world, the objects which we experience, the cognition, conation, and affection, and all those things which we experience every day, our everyday conscious experiences, corresponds to the plane of Mahakasha, according to Swamiji, the elemental space. And we think that is the whole of consciousness. That is the problem, one of the basic defects of modern approaches to the study of consciousness. They just consider this elemental space or Mahakasha as the for the study of consciousness. They don't consider the other 2 planes. While the superconscious plane, which Swamiji speaks of, corresponds to both Chittakasha and Chidakasha, the superconscious experiences, the Savikalpa Samadhi and the Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Now, Savikalpa, we have a lot of visions. So, a little of Chittakasha is also involved in that. But Chidakasha or pure consciousness is possible only in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Apart from this, Swamiji, as I told you, refers to another state which is known as ultra consciousness. We'll come to that. That is the wonderful idea of Vijnana, which we will come across. We'll quickly go through that idea also. Yeah. So, according to Swamiji, I'll just there are two or three more slides to explain these ideas of unconscious and superconsciousness. Unconscious, according to Swamiji, is below the conscious plane, where all actions are done without a state of agency. There is no ego or ahankara involved in that. Hence, all actions are performed automatically, mechanically, instinctively, and senselessly. When we say that most of our instinctive action, they are unconscious. So this is, according to Swamiji, what unconscious plane is. They include all our reflex action, bodily functions during sleep, actions which are driven by impulse. Swamiji says, he gives a wonderful example, the difference between superconscious and unconscious. Reflex actions, bodily, Swamiji says, people enter the realm of unconscious during sleep, but they don't change, because when they awake, there is hardly any change. They come back to the same state of consciousness. Whereas if somebody goes to the superconscious state, when he comes back to the conscious, he becomes a saint. That's the difference between unconscious and superconscious. Now, the intimate relationship between the conscious and unconscious planes, about that Swamiji says, the roots of all our evil deeds done on the conscious plane lie in the unconscious. Again, evil propensities lodged in the unconscious are attenuated by contrary actions on the conscious plane. In the conscious plane, when we do certain actions, it sinks into the unconscious. The unconscious, according to Swamiji, seems to synthesize. What he has done is he's taken some ideas from Freud, who was Sigmund Freud, where this concept of unconscious was first developed in the West, and Patanjali's subconscious impressions. Patanjali also speaks of subconscious impressions, samskaras, which according to Swamiji should be subdued while they are still in germ form. When they are in germ form, you have to handle them, otherwise they can be potentially dangerous. So Swamiji has integrated this Freudian concept of unconscious with the idea of samskaras in yoga. But it must be clearly noted that Swamiji's and Patanjali's concept of as compared to Freud, Swamiji's and Patanjali's concepts of samskaras or impressions is much broader and pervasive than the ideas of Freud. And these lay the basis to reincarnation and evolution. Now we'll come to that. The Patanjali says that Patanjali says in his Yoga Sutras, and Swamiji confirms it in his Raj Yoga, that these samskaras have this action which we do on the unconscious are intended to transform the whole personality and not just relive the past. As Sigmund Freud says, we have to relive the past, try to find out what is there in the subconscious. But Patanjali says, no, we have to transform ourselves, take out these repressed thoughts from the subconscious, unconscious, and then bring it to the conscious plane and nullify the negative impressions and then transform our personality. That is the basic difference between Freud's unconscious and the unconscious as or subconscious explained by Swamiji in his Raj Yoga. Now we come to the conscious plane. Swamiji calls the conscious plane a mere film between two oceans and between the subconscious and the superconscious. The feeling of egoism which we feel is only in the middle conscious plane between the unconscious and the superconscious plane. The mind is above, when the mind is above, when it is in the unconscious state or when it is in the superconscious state, there is no feeling of I. So Swamiji says in real inspiration, that's why Swamiji's famous quotation in famous idea in Raj Yoga is that real inspiration can never contradict reason. The mind's still there, but reason has its limitation. It is not the be all and end all of knowledge. That is the conscious experience. The rationality cannot be sacrificed. It is indispensable on the conscious plane. But he says that spiritual truths can be gained only on the superconscious plane. Now, coming to the superconscious plane, what are Swamiji's ideas? Superconscious knowledge always and in all religions accept this superconscious experience. Superconsciousness is a very important aspect of all religious traditions and spiritual traditions. So he says all religions gather experiences, gather their knowledge from these superconscious experiences. Even though the nature of superconscious knowledge varies depending on the differences in belief, culture, education and training, the result is that the same consciousness is interpreted in different ways in different traditions. But in both superconscious and unconscious state, there is no feeling of egoism or agency. That is one important aspect. Swamiji gives the experience, as I said, that fool who enters the unconscious state or deep sleep state returns the same, whereas the person who enters the superconscious state becomes a saint when he comes back to the conscious plane. So, as I said, Swamiji says that all the religions accept this fact, and there cannot be any religion or spirituality without accepting this superconscious state. So, now there is a last state. Now I'll have to conclude. I think I'm coming to the end of my time. Now Swamiji speaks of ultra consciousness. Now, what is this ultra consciousness? Ultra consciousness is identifying oneself with phenomenal existence, the samashti. There's an idea of samashti in Vedanta. So this ultra consciousness or the concept of Vijnana, Swamiji says, he describes this in the Inspired Talks and also in his paper on Hinduism. He says, speaking of this ultra consciousness, which is attained after Nirvikalpa Samadhi, when we see that same consciousness pervading this whole universe. This is the idea of Vijnana which Sri Ramakrishna spoke about, serving God in man. The whole practical Vedanta of Swamiji is based on that. So there is a beautiful quotation in his paper on Hinduism, which Swamiji delivered in Chicago. He says, "We are confined nowhere." It's a very important quote. I'll not show the slide. I'll just read it out. He says, "We are confined nowhere. We are not the body. The universe is our body. We are the spider in this huge web who can go on the varied strands wheresoever he desires. The spider now is only conscious of the spot where he is, but the spider will in time become conscious of the whole web, the samashti. We are now conscious only where our body is. We can use only one brain. But when we reach this ultra consciousness, these are Swamiji's words, we know all, we can use all brains. Even now, we can give a push to this push in consciousness, and it goes beyond and acts in the superconscious. So from conscious, through Raj Yoga, through yoga, this higher aspect of consciousness, which is super consciousness, which is the basis of all religions, Swamiji says we can give a push. It is happiness to enjoy the consciousness of the small body, the so-called consciousness with which science is so much enamored of and thinks it's a great thing. He says it is good to enjoy the consciousness of this small little body, but it must be greater happiness. Swamiji sees the logic of Swamiji to enjoy the consciousness of two bodies. And the measure of happiness increases with the consciousness of an increasing number of bodies. The aim and ultimate happiness being reached when it would become a universal consciousness. So this ultra consciousness, this concept of Vijnana, it is an intensification of this experience of super consciousness, according to Swamiji, where the transcendental consciousness permeates and percolates through the phenomenal consciousness or samashti. It seems to involve the identifying with the Mahat, or the sum total of all interconnected brains and minds. We'll find this idea in the life and teachings of Sri Ramakrishna. When Nirvikalpa Samadhi is attained, and then he says, you come down from the roof, come down and find that the same material with which the roof is made, the stairs and the other things are made. It is something akin to this idea of ultra consciousness. So that is the concept of Vijnana, a more intimate knowledge of Brahman. That is Swamiji's unique contribution based on Thakur's experience. Ultra consciousness is not just intensification of spiritual, the superconscious realization, but it lays the ethical or philosophical foundation of the entire 4 lectures which Swamiji gave, the practical Vedanta in UK, in London. He gave a practical expression to this ultra consciousness by recognizing that each soul is potentially divine, and recognizing this divinity of man and the oneness of existence is the goal of life. So this idea and the idea of Bhavamukha, Swami Atma Priyananji has written many articles, wonderful articles, you should read that, on this idea of Bhavamukha, which is unique to Sri Ramakrishna. So this ultra consciousness is something which Swamiji believed, or Swamiji described based on the experience of Vijnana or Bhavamukha. The Sharadananji's expression Bhavamukha will not go into that. I'm running short of time. I wanted to discuss some more things about evolution of nature and Darwin's theory and all those things, but let us conclude, because I'm already taken more than 40 minutes. So evolution of nature and manifestation of consciousness, how Swamiji differed from Darwin and proposed his own theory of evolution and involution based on this development of consciousness. So maybe on some other occasion we'll discuss. So I think I should conclude. So if there are some questions, I don't know whether I have exceeded the time. If there is no time, we can forego this. We can avoid the question answer session. So I take your leave. I'm very much thankful to Ramakrishna R.K.M. Veri, so especially Swami Atma Priyananji, from whom I got a lot of inspiration in my younger days, and I'm very happy that with the NIMHANS, this wonderful webinar has been organized, and in fact, we wanted to start based in Cambridge. Some Cambridge scientists were very keen to start a forum on consciousness, which we wanted to name as Prajnanam. So that was the idea, where we would involve all interdisciplinary studies on consciousness, and which would be based in Cambridge. But that seems to be a dream. Because of this COVID, we are not able to go forward. So it's our dream that people should come together and discuss these ideas, wonderful ideas of consciousness, as explained by Swamiji, based on his Raj Yoga, and so that the contemporary studies which are going on in the world in consciousness will benefit a lot. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Swami Sarvasthananda, for a huge, rich content, brilliant exposition, and ideas directly coming from Swami Vivekananda, Vedanta, Sankhya, and Yoga. We were so highly elevated, impressed. Now, and one more collaboration we are getting through you. So we have the Nimhans on board. We have the RKMVery, our center, Vivekananda Center for Consciousness Study and Research. Now we have discovered we have Prajnanam coming directly from Cambridge through you.
Yes. After COVID, not now.
COVID also is part of the consciousness, which is shaking the consciousness of the whole humanity.
The whole world, of the Samashti, yes.
The Samashti. So the little COVID is also possessed of consciousness. It is not aware of itself. We can make COVID aware of itself through transcending it. Yes. So we have, I think, about 10 minutes we can have questions on Swami Sarvasthananda's talk, Professor B.N. Kutty's talk, and Ravindranath's talk, because they also could not answer questions. So, but the questioners have to be very brief. Don't please give lectures, but very brief questions if you have any. Now the floor is open on all the three talks. I think it's going to be better if our Kirti Pradhananda can read those questions from the chat with the names. I have done it from here.
So this is for Sarvasthananji Maharaj from Indu Ramchandani.
Yes.
How can the samskaras be subdued at an early stage?
Oh yes, definitely. They are supposed to be. We have to subdue these samskaras at an early stage. Patanjali's, the idea of samskaras has to be studied in great depth. Maybe it will require one whole session. How to burn the seeds, Dagda Bij Avastha. The samskaras occur in various ways and the various levels of manifestation. They are present in the unconscious mind. So first of all, they have to be identified. That is the first issue, which is not possible for many of us. We don't even have the patience to understand or to even have some kind of introspective capacity to find out what these samskaras are there. So when we do yoga in the yoga school, it is very clearly delineated that how we have to understand these vrittis, the source of the vrittis, which are the samskaras. And when we deal with it, we have to, there are so many ways. I mean, it has to be dealt. Yes, the answer is briefly, the answer is it has to be dealt at the early stage. When the bubble rises to the top, then it is too late to stop it. But when it is in the seed form, there is in fact a state of mind where Dagda Bija means you just burn the seed so that it does not sprout at all. Once it starts sprouting, it will be very difficult to prevent the tree from growing. So the best thing is burn the seed or don't provide water. There are various ways. Providing water to the seed, nourishing it, or soil, or maybe best way is to burn it. That is the Dagda Bija Avastha. So yes, samskaras have to be handled and can be handled through the practice of yoga.
Any question to Ravindra?